The fall of Wall Maria, humanity's first collapse. The breach began in silence. One moment, Shiganshina District basked in the afternoon calm of a world that believed itself secure. Children played in streets that had known peace for over a century. Merchants conducted their business in the marketplace. The garrison regiment maintained its routine watch atop Wall Maria, their vigilance more ceremonial than urgent after generations without a significant Titan incursion. The gates had opened and closed countless times to facilitate the Survey Corps' expeditions, a procedure so standardized that few considered the vulnerability it created. On this particular afternoon, the Survey Corps had just returned from another expedition beyond the walls. Their numbers diminished as always, carrying their dead and wounded back to the dubious safety of civilization. The gates stood open to receive them. Then, without warning, a 60-meter hand gripped the lip of Wall Maria's southern gate. Before anyone could comprehend what loomed above them, the colossal Titan's face appeared over the 50-meter barrier that humanity had considered impenetrable for over a century. Time seemed to pause. Soldiers froze in disbelief. The creature's lipless mouth, its exposed musculature steaming in the afternoon air, peered down at the streets below. The Titan's skinless face bore no expression, yet its mere presence communicated something profound and terrible: the absolute inadequacy of humanity's defenses. Then came the kick that would reshape everything, a single motion that ended an era and initiated a cascade of events whose full implications would not be understood for years. The year was 845. For 107 years, the people sheltered behind the three concentric walls. Maria, Rose, and Sina had lived under the protection of structures they neither fully understood nor questioned. The walls stood as the sole legacy of King Karl Fritz, the 145th monarch of Eldia, who had constructed them using the founding Titan's power more than a century before. These barriers formed humanity's last refuge after Karl Fritz withdrew from the world, taking his people to Paradise Island and sealing them away from what they believed was a Titan-dominated wasteland where mankind had been hunted to near extinction. The three walls created a layered defense system that represented both humanity's salvation and its prison. Wall Maria formed the outermost ring with a radius stretching roughly 480 kilometers from the theoretical center point. Its total perimeter measured approximately 3,016 kilometers, encompassing an area of about 723,000 square kilometers, territory roughly equivalent to a large modern nation. 100 kilometers inward from Maria stood Wall Rose, providing a secondary barrier should the outer wall ever fall. Another 130 kilometers beyond Rose lay Wall Sina, the innermost ring protecting the royal capital of Mitras and the privileged elite who resided in the safest region of humanity's territory. All three structures rose 50 meters high, constructed from a substance that appeared to be advanced masonry, but was actually something far stranger. The material proved harder than any stone known to the people within, resistant to weathering, and seemingly impossible to damage through conventional means. What the inhabitants did not know, what only a select few in positions of religious or governmental authority understood, was that these walls contained the hardened bodies of countless colossal Titans, standing shoulder to shoulder in an eternal vigil, their true nature concealed beneath layers of hardened skin that formed the wall's surface. These wall Titans remained dormant, held in place through the power of the founding Titan and the will of King Karl Fritz. Their existence represented both the ultimate defense and the ultimate threat, a deterrent that Karl Fritz had wielded against the world when he issued his ultimatum to Marley. Any aggression against Paradise Island would result in the release of these millions of colossal Titans to flatten the Earth. The irony, unknown to nearly everyone, was that this threat was hollow. Karl Fritz and his royal descendants had vowed never to use the founding Titan's power for war, making the deterrent a bluff that nevertheless kept the world at bay for over a century. 4 districts punctuated each wall's circumference, outcropping settlements that jutted slightly beyond the main barrier like bait, designed to draw Titans toward concentrated defensive positions. The southern Shiganshina District served as one such extension of Wall Maria, home to roughly 10,000 residents who lived with the daily awareness that they occupied humanity's front line. Here, the garrison regiment maintained its most robust presence, manning fixed artillery positions and training for an assault everyone hoped would never come. Citizens understood their district's purpose. The design funneled Titans toward these population centers, where soldiers could focus their response, rather than attempting to defend thousands of kilometers of wall. This strategic vulnerability made Shiganshina both critical to the defense network and perpetually dangerous to inhabit. Within this southern district lived the Yeager family. Grisha Yeager worked as a physician, respected for his skill in treating diseases that periodically swept through the settlement. His wife Carla managed their household, while raising their son Aaron and their adopted daughter Mikasa Ackerman. To his neighbors, Grisha appeared unremarkable, a dedicated doctor who kept a locked basement beneath their home, claiming it contained sensitive medical instruments and research. None suspected that this basement held 3 journals documenting the true history of the world, information about the nation of Marley across the ocean, and proof that humanity thrived beyond the walls. Grisha had come from outside, sent on a mission to infiltrate Paradise Island and claim the founding Titan from the royal family. He possessed the power of the attack Titan, inherited from Aaron Kruger years before. But on this particular afternoon in 845, as he prepared to depart for business in the interior, Grisha had no knowledge of what was about to unfold. The attack came shortly after the Survey Corps returned from their latest expedition beyond Wall Maria. These soldiers had ventured into Titan territory to map safe routes and gather intelligence, part of humanity's perpetual effort to understand their enemy. They returned diminished, as always, having lost comrades to the Titans that roamed the wilderness. Their arrival signaled the opening of Shiganshina's gate to allow them entry, a routine procedure that had been executed countless times. But on this day, in the brief window while the gate stood accessible, the warriors of Marley moved into position. 4 warriors had been dispatched from Marley to Paradise Island for the Paradise Island operation. Children trained from ages 5 to 7 in Marley's warrior program to become vessels for Titan powers. This program represented Marley's solution to claiming Paradise Island's resources without provoking direct retaliation. By using Eldian children as weapons, Marley maintained plausible deniability while pursuing its strategic objectives. Marcel Galliard wielded the Jaw Titan, a swift and agile form with powerful jaws capable of crushing virtually any substance. Annie Leonhardt possessed the female Titan, notable for its hardening ability and a unique scream that could attract pure Titans. Reiner Braun commanded the armored Titan, a 15-meter form covered in hardened armor plating that made it nearly impervious to conventional weapons. Bertholdt Hoover controlled the Colossal Titan, the largest Titan form at 60 meters, capable of generating massive explosions during transformation and emitting scalding steam from its body. Their mission parameters were clear: infiltrate Paradise Island, locate the founding Titan held by the royal family within the walls, and either retrieve it or destroy it to eliminate the threat it represented. Success would neutralize Karl Fritz's ultimatum about releasing the Wall Titans, while simultaneously allowing Marley to claim Paradise Island's fossil fuel deposits. Failure would mean execution upon return to Marley, a fate considered merciful compared to being transformed into a mindless pure Titan and exiled to wander paradise forever. These children, none older than 12, carried the weight of Marley's strategic ambitions and their own desperate desire to earn honorary Marleyan status that might grant their families better treatment in Liberio's internment zone, where Eldians lived as second-class citizens. During their journey to the walls after being dropped at Paradise Island's coast, tragedy struck when the 4 young warriors encountered a Titan lying dormant in their path. The creature attacked suddenly, targeting Reiner. Marcel, acting on instinct or perhaps guilt over having manipulated the warrior selection to ensure his younger brother Porco did not receive a Titan power, pushed Reiner aside and was grabbed instead. The other warriors watched in horror as their leader was consumed. his jaw Titan power lost to a pure Titan that would later be revealed as Ymir, an Eldian woman who had wandered in that form for 60 years after being transformed and exiled by Marley's government as punishment for a crime she did not commit. Marcel's death left the surviving warriors shaken and leaderless. They debated abandoning the mission and returning to Marley to report the loss, but Reiner argued forcefully for continuing. The alternative, returning in failure with a Titan power, now in the hands of a random pure Titan on the island, would guarantee their execution and likely condemn their families as well. After intense debate, weighted by fear and desperation, they chose to continue rather than face certain death back home. When they finally reached Wall Maria weeks later, Bertholdt took his position at Shiganshina's southern gate. The Survey Corps' return provided the perfect cover. He transformed. The impact shattered the reinforced gate in a single blow. Debris from the destroyed entrance, chunks of stone, and hardened material weighing tons became projectiles that demolished buildings throughout Shiganshina's outer section. The blast scattered rubble across several blocks, crushing homes and burying residents in the wreckage. Among those structures destroyed was the Yeager household, where Carla had been inside when the debris struck. Support beams collapsed onto her, crushing her legs and trapping her beneath weight that even multiple adults could not hope to shift. Eren and Mikasa had been elsewhere in the district when the Colossal Titan appeared. They raced toward their home through streets rapidly descending into chaos, fighting against the tide of panicked citizens, fleeing toward the inner gate. The scene they encountered would become the defining trauma of both their lives. When they reached what remained of their house and found it reduced to ruins, Carla trapped beneath the debris with her legs crushed. Both children desperately tried to free her. They pulled at the beams with all their strength, their hands bloodying against the rough wood, straining with every ounce of force their young bodies could muster, but the weight proved far beyond their capability. Mikasa, despite her extraordinary strength that would later be recognized as an Ackerman trait, could not shift the massive support beam. Eren screamed and pulled until his muscles gave out, refusing to accept what was becoming horrifically clear. Carla recognized the futility immediately. She could see the Titans already entering through the destroyed gate hundreds of meters away, pure instinct driving them toward the concentrated human population. She could hear the screams of other victims, see the smoke rising from fires throughout the district. Her children were wasting precious seconds that might mean the difference between escape and death. Every moment they remained with her decreased their chances of reaching the inner gate before it closed, or before the Titans reached this section of the district. She begged her children to leave her and flee to safety, her voice rising in desperation as she saw the approaching Titan, an abnormal specimen with a disturbing permanent smile carved into its features, moving with unsettling purpose through the destruction. Hannes, a garrison soldier and family friend, arrived at the scene. He had known the Yeager family for years, had shared drinks with Grisha, had watched Eren and Mikasa grow up. He initially declared his intention to fight the approaching Titan, drawing his blade and preparing to engage. But as the creature drew nearer, as Hannes stared into that grotesque smiling face and confronted the reality of facing such a monster in direct combat, his courage failed utterly. He had trained for this moment, had imagined himself heroic in defense of his friends. But the primal terror induced by the Titan's presence overwhelmed his training. The soldier made the agonizing choice to grab both children and run, abandoning Carla as she had requested. He justified the decision by telling himself he was following her orders, that saving the children honored her sacrifice. But the guilt would haunt him for the rest of his life. As Hannes carried them away with Eren struggling violently against his grip and screaming for his mother, the boy witnessed his mother's final moments. The smiling Titan reached into the rubble, pulled Carla free from the debris that had held her, and lifted her broken body into the air. Carla fought for a moment, striking at the Titan's fingers, but the creature's grip was absolute. Then it bit down, severing her body at the waist before consuming her while Eren watched, helpless and screaming until his voice gave out. This single image, his mother's terrified face in the Titan's grip, the moment of her death, his own absolute powerlessness, would define his purpose for years to come. The hatred that took root in that instant would drive him to join the military, to seek the power to fight back, and ultimately to make choices whose consequences would extend far beyond anything he could imagine in that moment of trauma. What Aaron could not know in that moment was that the smiling Titan had once been Dina Fritz, the first wife of his father Grisha, transformed into a pure Titan years earlier by Marley as punishment for her involvement with the Eldian restorationists. Nor could he know that this specific Titan's targeting of his mother, rather than other potential victims, resulted from manipulation by his future self using the founding Titan's power across time, a necessary atrocity to ensure certain individuals survived and certain events unfolded as required. While Shiganshina descended into massacre, the garrison attempted to mount a defense. Soldiers directed civilians toward the inner gate, the second barrier that separated the district's outer section from the town proper and Wall Maria's interior territory. Artillery crews fired their cannons at the invading Titans, but the weapons proved woefully inadequate. Titans regenerated from wounds that would kill any normal creature, their supernatural healing factor making conventional warfare nearly useless. The best the defenders could achieve was slowing the advance long enough for evacuation to proceed. Then came the second breach, as the garrison struggled to manage the evacuation and debate whether to seal the inner gate, potentially saving Wall Maria's interior, but dooming thousands still trapped in Shiganshina's outer section. Reiner Braun acted, transforming into his 15-meter armored Titan, his body covered in hardened armor plating that rendered him effectively impervious to the garrison's weapons. He charged the inner gate at full speed. The impact obliterated the barrier completely. With both Shiganshina's gates destroyed, Titans poured into Wall Maria's territory, spreading throughout the region and making the entire outer wall's holdings indefensible. The garrison had no choice but to retreat. All surviving civilians in Shiganshina were loaded onto boats and ferried across to Walrose's territory, while soldiers attempted to hold back the Titan horde long enough for the evacuation to complete. Bertholdt reverted to human form immediately after his initial attack. Annie Leonhardt, transformed into her female Titan form, had attracted Titans from across the surrounding area toward Shiganshina's breach, using her scream, a property unique to her Titan that drew pure Titans to her location. In the chaos, the three surviving warriors infiltrated Walrose's territory among the refugees. They adopted the identities of displaced citizens, using the confusion and incomplete records to create false backstories about villages destroyed during Wall Maria's fall. No one questioned the orphaned children claiming to be survivors from remote settlements. The warriors had successfully inserted themselves into the population, positioning themselves to continue their mission from within. In the interior, separate events unfolded that would prove equally consequential. Grisha Yeager learned of the attack and his wife's death. He made his way to the Reiss family's chapel, where the true royal bloodline maintained their secret existence away from the puppet monarchy in the capital. Beneath the chapel lay a cavern, where the founding Titan passed from one Reiss heir to the next. The current holder, Frida Reiss, had inherited the power after consuming her uncle. She bore not only the founding Titan's abilities, but also the will of King Karl Fritz, a self-imposed limitation that prevented any royal-blooded Titan wielder from using the coordinates' full power to alter Eldian physiology or command the Wall Titans. Grisha confronted Frida, begging her to use the founding Titan to defend against the Titan invasion and save her people. Frida refused, bound by the vow renouncing war that every royal-blooded inheritor bore. This pacifist ideology formed the core of Karl Fritz's vision, that Eldians deserved whatever extinction Marley chose to inflict upon them as punishment for the Eldian Empire's historical sins. Grisha, knowing that inaction would doom everyone on Paradise Island, chose to act. He transformed into his attack Titan and battled Frida's founding Titan. Despite Frida's superior size and power, Grisha's experience and desperation gave him the advantage. He defeated her, consuming Frida and thereby stealing the founding Titan from the royal family. In the aftermath, overcome with grief for what he had done but recognizing necessity, Grisha slaughtered the other Reiss family members present in the chapel. Historia's siblings and mother, to prevent them from reclaiming the stolen power. Only Reiss, Historia's father, managed to escape the massacre. Grisha then made his way to Wall Rose, where the refugees from Shiganshina had gathered. He found Aaron and Mikasa among the displaced survivors. Learning the confirmed details of Carla's death from his son, Grisha led Aaron into a nearby forest. There, he injected Aaron with Titan serum stolen from the Reiss family's supplies, forcibly transforming his 10-year-old son into a pure Titan. He gave Aaron the key to their basement in Shiganshina, along with fragmented instructions about returning to discover what lay hidden there. Then Grisha allowed his transformed son to consume him, transferring both the attacked Titan and the stolen, founding Titan to Aaron. The trauma of the transformation and the act of consuming his father caused Aaron's memories of these events to fragment and bury themselves. Former Survey Corps Commander Keith Shadis discovered the unconscious boy shortly afterward and returned him to the refugee center, where Aaron would wake with no recollection of what had transpired in that forest. The fall of Wall Maria represented humanity's greatest catastrophe in over a century. Approximately 10,000 citizens died in Shiganshina alone during the initial attack and the massacre that followed. The entirety of Wall Maria's territory, encompassing about 1/3 of humanity's total living space, was abandoned to the Titans. Hundreds of thousands of refugees fled inward to Wall Rose, creating an immediate and severe crisis. The sudden loss of Wall Maria's agricultural lands meant the remaining population could no longer be sustained by the resources available in Wall Rose and Wall Sina's territories. Food shortages developed rapidly as the influx of refugees overwhelmed the capacity of the surviving farmlands. The royal government, faced with an impossible situation that threatened the survival of everyone within the remaining walls, implemented a brutal solution masked as a military operation. In 846, 1 year after Wall Maria's fall, they announced the operation to retake Wall Maria, supposedly a campaign to reclaim the lost territory and restore humanity's domain. The announcement was framed as a heroic endeavor, an opportunity for refugees to reclaim their homes and for humanity to strike back against the Titans that had invaded their territory. Recruitment centered heavily on the refugee population, with subtle pressure applied through the rationing system and the implicit message that those who contributed to the reclamation effort would be viewed more favorably than those who remained dependent on government support. In reality, the operation served as population control disguised as military action. The government's strategic planners had calculated the numbers with cold precision. The loss of Wall Maria's agricultural territory meant that the remaining farmland within Wall Rose could support perhaps 80% of the current population at subsistence level. The refugee influx had increased the population within Wall Rose by roughly 40%, creating an immediate shortfall that would only worsen as stored supplies depleted. Without drastic action, widespread famine would begin within 2 years, leading to social collapse, riots, and potentially the complete breakdown of civilization within the walls. The solution, viewed through the lens of brutal pragmatism that governed royal policy, was to eliminate enough people to restore balance between population and resources. Nearly 250,000 people, representing approximately 20% of the remaining human population, were conscripted and sent beyond Wall Rose to fight the Titans occupying Maria's territory. These conscripts included many refugees who possessed no military training, no experience with the three-dimensional maneuvering gear used to fight Titans, and no realistic chance of survival in combat. The expedition also included some genuine military personnel to maintain the appearance of a real operation. But the majority were untrained civilians, given basic weapons, and sent to die. The Survey Corps, which accompanied the operation, understood immediately what was happening, but lacked the authority or power to intervene. They could only watch as thousands were led to slaughter under the pretense of reclaiming humanity's territory. The operation proceeded exactly as the government had planned. Almost all 250,000 participants died at the hands of Titans within days of departing Wall Rose. The few survivors who managed to retreat back to the wall brought horror stories of untrained civilians being overwhelmed by titans they had no ability to fight, of soldiers unable to protect the masses of refugees pressed into service, of complete chaos as the enormity of the mismatch became apparent. The expedition succeeded in its true purpose, ensuring the survival of the remaining population by eliminating enough people to make available resources sufficient. This calculated genocide by proxy revealed the moral bankruptcy at the heart of the government's response to the crisis. Though the full truth was concealed from the general population, most citizens believed the operation had been a genuine attempt at reclamation that failed due to Titan strength rather than by design. Among those who died in the operation was Armin Arlert's grandfather, a loss that would reinforce Armin's determination to ensure such deaths served some purpose by eventually succeeding where this false operation had failed. The psychological impact on survivors matched the physical devastation. The walls had stood for 107 years, their impenetrability an article of faith that gave meaning to society's structure. The appearance of a titan capable of exceeding wall height shattered that certainty absolutely. Citizens who had lived their entire lives believing the walls offered absolute protection now faced the knowledge that these barriers could be breached, that their safety was conditional, that extermination remained a constant possibility. The Survey Corps, long dismissed as suicidal glory, seekers wasting lives on meaningless expeditions, suddenly gained relevance as the only branch of the military with experience fighting titans in open territory. The garrison regiment, responsible for wall defense, faced scrutiny for their failure to prevent or adequately respond to the breach. The military police brigade, stationed in the interior and concerned primarily with maintaining order around the capital, remained largely unaffected and continued their comfortable existence, creating resentment among those who had lost everything. For the young survivors who witnessed the attack, the trauma manifested as determination. Carla Yeager swore to eliminate every Titan in existence. His mother sensed death burning into him a hatred that would fuel his decisions for years to come. Mikasa Ackerman attached herself to Eren with fierce protectiveness, viewing him as her only remaining family. Armin Arlert, who witnessed the chaos, though his family survived, recognized that humanity's survival required reclaiming Wall, Maria, and discovering what lay beyond. These three would join the 104th Training Corps in 847, 2 years after the fall, seeking the means to make a difference in a war that suddenly seemed unwinnable. The warriors' mission continued in shadow. Reiner Braun, Bertholdt Hoover, and Annie Leonhardt joined the same training corps, positioning themselves to earn placement in the top 10 graduates, a distinction that granted access to the military police brigade, and therefore the interior where the royal family presumably resided. Their cover held perfectly. They presented themselves as ordinary refugees traumatized by Wall Maria's fall, victims who had lost everything like thousands of others. None suspected these three teenagers had orchestrated the disaster themselves, that they carried the power of titans within them, that their ultimate goal involved either retrieving or destroying the founding titan. The fall initiated changes that would ripple through the years ahead. The balance of power within the walls shifted as desperation replaced complacency. The Survey Corps gained increased authority and resources. Their mission to explore beyond the walls and find routes to Shiganshina acquiring new urgency. Commander Erwin Smith began developing strategies to reach Wall Maria's ruins and seal the breach, understanding that reclaiming the lost territory was essential both strategically and psychologically. The mystery of Grisha Yeager's basement took on mythological significance as Eren shared his father's dying words about finding answers there, though the full meaning remained elusive until years later, when the secrets contained in those three journals would recontextualize everything. Reiss, the sole surviving member of the true royal family present during Grisha's attack, went into hiding. He began searching for his illegitimate daughter Historia, knowing he would need a royal-blooded individual to reclaim the founding titan from whoever now possessed it. The puppet government in Mitras, unaware that the genuine royal line still existed, continued administering the walls under the belief that humanity must accept its fate, as Karl Fritz had decreed. This created a shadow conflict between Reiss's attempts to restore the founding Titan to royal control and the Survey Corps' efforts to reclaim Wall Maria and discover the truth about their world. The three warrior children lived with the knowledge of what they had done, carrying a burden that would shape their personalities and choices for years to come. Bertholdt and Reiner had directly caused thousands of deaths through their attacks on the gates. Annie had lured Titans to the breach using her female Titan's scream, knowingly drawing the monsters toward civilians. They had destroyed families, orphaned children, precipitated starvation, and enabled the government-sanctioned population reduction that followed. The weight of these actions sat differently on each of them based on their personalities and coping mechanisms. Yet they were also children themselves, products of Marley's indoctrination system that had trained them from early childhood to view the people of paradise as devils deserving extermination. They had been taught that Eldians within the walls were responsible for historical atrocities committed by the Eldian Empire centuries ago, that eliminating them would protect the world from another era of Eldian oppression. This ideological framework provided justification for their actions, but it began to crack as they lived among the very people they had victimized. The cognitive dissonance of training alongside those who had lost family in the attack they caused, forming genuine friendships with people who viewed them as fellow survivors rather than enemies, created psychological fractures that would manifest differently in each warrior. Reiner developed a dissociative disorder that allowed him to compartmentalize his identity. He created a soldier persona that genuinely cared about his comrades and wanted to protect humanity, while maintaining a warrior persona focused on completing his mission for Marley. These identities operated separately, with Reiner sometimes forgetting which role he was playing. This dissociation allowed him to function without being paralyzed by guilt, but it also made him unpredictable and created moments where he nearly exposed his true nature through confusion about which identity was real. Bertholdt retreated into passivity and emotional distance. He avoided making decisions whenever possible, deferring to Reiner's leadership and Annie's judgment rather than asserting his own will. This passivity served as protection against confronting the full weight of what he had done. By positioning himself as someone merely following orders and supporting others' plans, Bertholdt could maintain psychological distance from his role as the Colossal Titan who had kicked in Wall Maria's gate. He became quiet and unassuming, someone easy to overlook, which served their mission well but also reflected his internal retreat from engagement with the moral implications of his actions. Annie maintained emotional distance through deliberate cultivation of apathy. She viewed her mission as a grim duty to complete so she could return to her father in Marley, the one person whose opinion mattered to her. She refused to form genuine attachments to people within the walls, seeing such connections as complications that would make her mission harder. Her combat skills and cold efficiency made her valuable to the warrior team, but her isolation also reflected deep cynicism about the possibility of any moral clarity in their situation. She had been raised by a father who trained her brutally in combat, while also expressing genuine love, creating a complicated worldview where violence and care could coexist without contradiction. The fall of Wall Maria in 845 marked the point where the comfortable stagnation of the previous century ended and desperate action became necessary. It exposed humanity's vulnerability, shattered illusions of security, and killed or displaced hundreds of thousands. It placed the founding Titan in the hands of a child who possessed no knowledge of what he carried or how to use it. It positioned Marley's warriors within the military structure, setting up confrontations that would occur years later when identities were revealed. Most significantly, it created the conditions that would eventually force the truth about the world beyond the walls into the light, a truth that would transform the conflict from a seemingly simple matter of human survival against mindless monsters into something far more complex and morally ambiguous. The sun set on Shiganshina District on that day in 845 with the settlement in ruins, its gate destroyed, and Titans wandering freely through streets where children had played hours before. The smoke from fires burning throughout the district rose into the evening sky. Visible from Wall rose as a grim reminder of what had been lost. Survivors packed into temporary shelters near Wallro's districts, uncertain of their future, mourning their dead, and trying to process the impossible thing they had witnessed. A titan taller than the walls themselves. Proof that humanity's last refuge was not as impregnable as they had believed. In the forest near Trost district, Carla Yeager woke with a key hanging from his neck and no memory of how he had acquired it or why it mattered. The last clear thing he recalled was watching his mother die, and the chaos of the refugee evacuation. Everything after existed as fragments and shadows. Glimpses of his father's face, a sensation of pain and transformation, darkness. But the key remained, a physical reminder that his father had tried to tell him something important, that answers existed somewhere if he could only reach them. He would spend the next 5 years training to become strong enough to fight back, to reclaim what had been lost, to reach that basement in Shiganshina and discover what his father had left for him there. The key represented hope that meaning could be found in the tragedy, that his mother's death and the deaths of thousands served some larger purpose, that humanity was not simply being exterminated for no reason by inexplicable monsters. This hope would sustain Eren through grueling training, through the revelation that he possessed Titan powers himself, through battles that would cost the lives of friends and comrades. The promise of answers in that basement became symbolic of humanity's quest for truth, in a world where the government concealed information, where the official history taught in schools bore little resemblance to reality, and where the fundamental questions about Titans and the world beyond the walls remained unanswered. The fall of Wall Maria ended humanity's century of peace and forced a confrontation with reality that would ultimately extend far beyond the walls themselves, far beyond the question of Titan versus human. It set in motion events that would reveal the true nature of the walls as containers for millions of colossal Titans. The existence of the world beyond paradise where human civilization thrived. The history of Eldians and Marlians locked in a cycle of hatred and revenge. And the impossible choices that follow when peace proves impossible and survival requires actions that strip away moral certainty. Every significant event in the years that followed the Battle of Trost, the female Titan's infiltration, the revelation of the warriors' identities, the uprising against the false monarchy, the expedition to retake Shiganshina, and ultimately the discovery of what lay beyond the ocean, traced its origins back to that afternoon when the colossal Titan appeared over Shiganshina's gate. The fall demonstrated that the supposed security of the walls was illusory, that the century of peace had been bought through isolation and ignorance, rather than genuine resolution of the conflicts that created the walls in the first place. It revealed that the governed prioritized order over truth and would sacrifice thousands to maintain stability. It showed that humanity's greatest threat came not just from Titans, but from other humans willing to use Titan powers as weapons. Most fundamentally, it marked the beginning of a process that would strip away layers of comfortable lies and force the people of paradise to confront their true position in a much larger and more complicated world than they had imagined. The breach in Wall Maria was also a breach in the carefully constructed narrative that had sustained Paradisian society for over a century, and once opened, that breach could never be fully sealed again.